Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Christian has finally done it. He and Alex are official. But of course, their love story wouldn't be complete without family stepping in to disrupt what should have been a perfect, love-filled getaway. Now, as they return home, Alex and Christian will face questions neither of them expected. Questions about loyalty, about whether family ties are truly stronger than love, and whether it's ever too soon to start talking about forever. Beginning of Chapter 1. Alex's POV. Hello, everyone. It's been a while. I feel like I should give myself a quick recap of what that Hawaii trip even turned into, because sitting on a red-eye flight home, surrounded by Joan, Brad, Derek, and Christian, was not how I imagined it would end. A lot was running through my head, but most of all, Christian and I were now official. Thinking back on the conversation we had just hours ago on the beach still made my heartbeat quicken. On the beach, earlier. But I don't know, Christian had said, voice low. Sometimes I wonder if one day I'll look in the mirror and not recognize myself from how much I've changed, but now I realize the real problem is different. I'm not afraid of change. I'm ashamed of all the times I looked in the mirror these past few years and thought I did recognize myself. That struck a deep chord within me. You've made me value everything more, he whispered. My family, my work, you. Back on the plane, Christian was beside me, shifting restlessly, unable to get comfortable. He refused to let go of my hand, even as he tried to sleep. His fingers would tighten around mine every so often, and I couldn't tell if he was truly asleep or not. My thoughts drifted back again to his words on the beach. I've never been with someone where every conversation feels so open, so effortless. I've never met someone who could embody the word beautiful so completely. I've never wanted to give so much of myself to anyone, until you came along, Alex, with your wit and your sarcasm, and somehow became part of my life. I remembered the way he had looked at me in that moment. It stole my breath. All I could think about was how much I wanted him by my side. You'll have to forgive me if my words stumble, he had added softly, because this is new territory for me. But it's a territory I want to grow used to, with you. And even if I've never felt this before, I'm certain of one thing. I've fallen deeply in love with you, Alexander Hamilton. Those last words? I can't even describe what they did to me. If he had asked me to marry him then and there, I would have said yes. If he had asked me to follow him anywhere in the world, I would have gone. Christian's POV. By the time we landed, I couldn't even tell you what day it was. The flight felt endless. I just want a real bed, I muttered to Alex at the baggage claim. And you beside me. He swatted at my hands as I tried to sneak in a hug. Let me at least figure out where our suitcases went, he said, staring with Brad at the empty carousel. Since it looks like you two have it handled, I'm going to head out, Derek chimed in. He'd slept through most of the flight, so quiet I almost forgot he was even with us. You didn't bring a suitcase? Brad asked, frowning. Nope, Derek replied proudly. This trip was on a tight budget. Just me, my backpack, and my wits. Alex sighed beside me. Look, if the bags don't turn up, I'll replace whatever's lost. Can we just go home already? I leaned closer. And what if I told you I packed a few surprises for you in my bag? I winked, which earned me a playful glare. Brad, still staring at the belt, looked ready to collapse. Do you see anyone working here? As soon as you spot someone, let me know, he muttered. The tension was starting to show on all of us. Derek announced his departure again, and Joan grumbled about wanting to go too, but Brad's offer to take her home softened her mood instantly. Meanwhile, I yawned so wide it hurt. Alex muttered something about us all leaving with Derek if the bags didn't show soon. And, as if on cue, 4 black suitcases appeared on the belt. Finally, Alex breathed in relief, almost giddy. Grab your stuff, we're going home. He didn't even bother specifying whose home. Because for him, and for me, home was wherever we were together. Christian's POV. As soon as Alex and I stepped out of the airport, we were hit by the blinding glare of the rising sun. This is madness, I muttered under my breath. I had imagined waking up in our resort room, wrapped around Alex, maybe brushing off a little leftover sand from our time on the beach. That was the morning I wanted, not this exhaustion and chaos. The sun's already up? Joan sighed. Her tone almost captured how I felt, but not quite. We should probably head home, Brad suggested, struggling to balance his suitcase and carry-on in one hand while typing on his phone with the other. Knowing him, he was already rearranging meetings for the week. With our new partnership with Mavericks just launched, I couldn't imagine the workload he was about to face. I barely processed what he meant by home until he clarified, I mean to Mom and Dad's place. I shot him a look that asked if he had lost his mind. I'm going to curl up somewhere soft with Alex and sleep. You can visit our parents if you want, but I'm not dealing with that until I've had at least 8 hours and some coffee. Brad frowned at my bluntness, but eventually nodded. I guess I'll rest too, he admitted, looking like he could barely stand upright. Honestly, I was relieved. Any conversation with our parents right now would have been a disaster. The only thing keeping me from snapping was Alex's hands still linked with mine. Joan leaned against Brad for support, nearly toppling him over. Thankfully, Alex reacted quickly, giving them a gentle push upright before they all went down together. The sound of honking drew our attention as 3 sleek black company cars sped toward us, weaving through traffic like a movie stunt scene. Why are they driving like this is an action film? Brad asked why. I might have told the communications team to remind the drivers their jobs depend on punctuality, I said casually. Brad gave me a long look. And why would you do that? I shrugged. Because it's true. The drivers pulled up sharply, one already apologizing as he jumped out, while another loaded our bags. Brad had arranged 3 cars, one for him and Joan, one for Alex and me, and one presumably for Derek. But Derek had already disappeared, heading toward the rideshare pickup, leaving us all a little envious of his quick escape. Would it be all right if I took the extra car home? Joan asked Brad. I feel like a mess. I just want to freshen up. We all understood. Even Joan, who usually looked flawless, was clearly worn down from the flight. Brad softened. I don't mind at all. I'll let the drivers know. He opened the door for her before moving toward his own car, their conversation brief but gentle. One of the drivers approached me. Your car is ready, sir. I made sure Alex got in first before sliding in beside him. Finally, we were leaving. Still heading to your home, sir? The driver asked. Yes, I answered with a nod. Beside me, Alex fiddled nervously with the hem of the t-shirt I'd bought him, the one from that ridiculous hot dog eating contest. The soft fabric was a surprisingly good choice for the long flight back. You know, he said hesitantly, maybe Joan was onto something. Maybe I should go home first, just to pull myself together. I immediately took his hand, lacing our fingers together. Alex, I've seen you at your worst, throwing up after too much to drink in New York, and I once helped my dad hose down Derek after he nearly gave himself alcohol poisoning. Trust me, I've seen messy. The only person I haven't seen out of sorts is Joan, so she's earned her fresh start. You, on the other hand, are coming home with me for a nap. Alex's POV. I sighed, squeezing Christian's hand a little tighter as I leaned against him. The driver swerved back onto the proper lane after briefly clipping the curb, and we merged toward the exit. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and every inch of me begged for a shower. But as much as I wanted to argue, it was hard to resist Christian when he made so much sense, especially on the rare occasions he did. Christian's POV. As soon as the company car pulled up to the estate, I gave Alex a gentle nudge. Despite fighting to stay awake for most of the ride, sleep had finally won. His head rested against my shoulder, his breathing even. Alex, I whispered. The sound he made in response was unlike anything I'd ever heard, something between a groan and a croak. Alex, I tried again, nudging him a little more. His eyes blinked open slowly. Are we here? He mumbled, rubbing at his tired eyes. Yep, come look. Let's get you to bed. He moved sluggishly, but together we climbed the steps to my home. Before I could reach for the door, Nathaniel opened it for us. As always, he was dressed in one of his pressed vests and tailored trousers, But this time his vest buttons were uneven and deep shadows lay beneath his eyes. I had never seen him look so worn. "Good aft. Well, morning," he corrected himself, glancing at the sky. "Actually, let's just go with good day." He gave a small nod, fumbling through the greeting. I raised a brow. Nathaniel wasn't himself. "Good day, Nathaniel. My apologies for springing all these changes on you," I said, guiding a drowsy Alex inside with our bags. "No need to apologize, sir. This is my job." His tone was steady, but even his words carried fatigue. He quickly took the suitcases from me. "Alex." I tapped his shoulder gently. He turned his head, eyes half closed. "Why don't you head up to my room and get comfortable? I'll be there in a bit." He nodded and shuffled down the hall. Nathaniel and I watched him disappear from sight. "Let's talk in my office," I said to Nathaniel. In my study, he downed a small glass of whiskey as though it were water. My eyes widened. I had never seen him quite like this. "You should have gone to see your parents first," he said, pouring himself another. "Nathaniel, look at me." My words came out fast, bordering on frantic. I am not in the right state of mind to see them. I'm one small irritation away from losing my temper. And with my father, that would only escalate until my mother stepped in, and I don't need that right now. Not before 8 in the morning. I glanced at the tall clock in the corner. Nathaniel studied me, then gave a weary nod. "I've worked with your family for so long, it feels like all my life." "I thought I had seen it all," he trailed off, finishing his drink. I didn't pour myself one. It wasn't just because of the hour. I wanted to be clear-headed when I went back to Alex. After the trip, I wanted nothing more than to kiss him, and I didn't want whiskey lingering on my breath when I did. Still, I caught Nathaniel's earlier words. "Did my parents tell you what they were supposed to tell Brad and me? About why they let Vadik go?" His silence told me everything. Whatever they had shared with him weighed heavily. "I think it would be best if your parents explain," he said carefully. I let out a humorless laugh. "They've had 1,000 chances to explain things. We wouldn't be in this mess if they ever did. I know you're angry, and I know they've given you little reason to trust them. But I ask you, just listen before you react. Isn't the saying, 'listen before you speak'?" I asked dryly. "For you know," he said. "Listen before you react." Despite his exhaustion, he reached for another drink. "But enough of that. How was your trip?" before it was cut short. A small smile tugged at my lips. "It was wonderful. Hard to believe Joan, Brad, and Derek all ended up there, but somehow, they did. Still, I had time with Alex. Not as much as I hoped, but enough." Nathaniel leaned forward with interest. "Did you use the L word?" I rolled my eyes. I told him I was falling in love with him. Not that I love him outright. I didn't want to overwhelm him. I mean, I was technically asking him out. It didn't feel right to leap straight into that. "You'd be surprised how often people do," Nathaniel murmured, standing abruptly. "But enough chatting. I'm glad you're back, sir. I think I'll finally get some rest. As you can see, I didn't find much sleep last night." "Yeah, you look terrible," I teased. He smirked faintly. "The same could be said for you." I chuckled as I stood to walk him out. "When should I have you wake me?" I started to say a few hours, but paused. "Actually, I'll see how Alex feels. Meetings with my family can wait. I've left him alone in bed too many times before. Not today." Nathaniel gave me a knowing nod before heading to his chambers. I turned down the hall, eager to get back to Alex. Alex's POV. I couldn't tell what time sleep had found me, or when it left me. What I did know was that an arm tightened around my waist, pulling me closer, gently stirring me awake. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of daylight slipping past Christian's blinds. As I shifted, his hand brushed against me, grounding me in his presence. I leaned back against him, feeling the warmth of his chest. For a moment I stayed still, not wanting the moment to end. "Alex?" His voice whispered softly, rough with sleep. I made some kind of noise, half a groan, half a protest, but he nudged me again until my eyes blinked open. "Are we home?" I murmured. "Yeah," he replied, smiling faintly. "Come on, love." Let's get you comfortable. We eventually made it upstairs, and I collapsed into his bed. When I stirred again later, Christian was there, hovering above me, his dark eyes locked on mine. "Good morning," he whispered in that low, raspy tone that always managed to undo me. I smirked tiredly. Pretty sure it's not morning anymore. That only made his smile deepen. He leaned closer, his arms sinking into the mattress until his lips brushed mine. The kiss was soft at first, familiar and grounding. My hands tangled in his messy hair, and before I knew it, I was pulling him even closer. It was the first kiss we had shared since Hawaii. Though it had only been yesterday, it felt like forever. When his lips left mine and trailed gently to my neck, my breath caught. His words tickled against my skin. "We never got to finish what we started on that beach," he murmured. "I wanted you to know just how much your words meant to me last night." My chest tightened at that. I had stumbled through telling him how deeply I cared, nearly in tears as I tried to explain what he meant to me. It hadn't come out perfectly, but the way he had listened, really listened, had made me feel seen in a way I never had before. When I looked up at him now, his gaze was tender, almost reverent. "You have such a delicate face," he whispered, brushing his thumb along my cheek. "These are the moments I value most. When I can see you, just you. No walls. No distractions." A shiver ran through me at his words. I held his gaze, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between us. His lips met mine again, slower this time, filled with unspoken promises. The world outside the room seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of us, hearts racing, breaths mingling, tangled in the quiet intensity of being fully present with one another. For a long while, there were no more words. Just the rhythm of closeness, the warmth of his body, and the quiet truth we were both learning to accept. We belonged to each other. Alex's POV. When Christian's lips found mine again, it was like he unlocked energy I didn't know I had left. My arms wrapped tightly around him, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. Every place his hands touched left a trail of warmth, sending sparks through me. His fingers brushed along my sides, steady and gentle, as though memorizing every inch of me. I couldn't hold back the soft sound that escaped my lips, but Christian didn't pull away. Instead, his eyes found mine, dark with emotion, filled with something that made my chest ache in the best way. He lowered his forehead to mine, whispering, "You don't know how much last night meant to me. How much you mean to me." My breath caught. The memory of our conversation on the beach, my shaky words, his steady ones, flashed through my mind. The honesty between us had been raw and terrifying, but beautiful. For the first time, I had let someone truly see me, and he hadn't looked away. Now, as he hovered above me, his touch softened, almost reverent. His thumb brushed my cheek as if I were something fragile. "I value this," he murmured, his voice low but certain. "When it's just us, no walls, no masks, just you and me." A shiver ran through me at the way he said it. He leaned in again, kissing me slowly, deliberately, with a patience that made it feel like time itself had stopped. His presence was overwhelming, not in a way that suffocated, but in a way that made me feel completely claimed, body, heart, and soul. I held on to him, afraid to let go, afraid that if I did, this moment would vanish like a dream. My heart raced, not just from his closeness, but from the realization settling deep within me. I was his, and he was mine. When our eyes met again, there was no doubt, no hesitation, just a quiet certainty. Whatever lay ahead, whatever storms we had to face with family, with life, with everything else, this was real. And it was worth fighting for. Christian's POV. Leaving Alex that evening was harder than I could put into words. Walking out of that room, leaving him resting in my bed, felt wrong. Almost impossible. But Nathaniel urged me to go, assuring me he'd take care of Alex's dinner and arrange transportation home if needed. Alex had insisted he wasn't hungry, but Nathaniel didn't accept that answer. "I'll get some chili heated up," I heard him say as I stepped out onto the front steps, closing the door behind me. The sky had nearly darkened by then, only a faint trace of light clinging to the horizon. My mind wandered as I drove, still caught up in the memory of Alex. His smile, his trust, the way being near him made the world feel different. Each moment we spent together seemed to grow more meaningful, more layered with comfort and discovery. He was letting me in, piece by piece, and I found myself wanting to give him the same. I couldn't help but think of the black bag I had carelessly left by my bedside. Things I had purchased on a whim before our trip, tucked away and forgotten until Nathaniel had quietly placed them out while we were gone. Embarrassment tugged at me when I realized he likely knew more than I ever intended him to. Most of it was probably too much, things Alex might never even want to explore. Still, the thought lingered, both nervous and hopeful. I shook the thoughts from my head as I pulled into my parents' estate. The familiar brick exterior glowed under the lawn lights, exactly as it had when I left. Yet the weight in my chest only grew heavier. A warm voice greeted me before I could step inside. "Good evening, sir." "Evening, Steve," I replied, offering a smile to my mother's longtime driver, and one of the few genuinely kind constants in this house. "How's the night treating you?" I asked. "Oh, you know," he laughed nervously, and I caught a flicker of unease in his expression. That was unusual. Steve had been here long enough to know how difficult my parents could be, but rarely did he show his concern so openly. "I'll let you see for yourself," he added, his tone carrying more weight than his words. Another red flag. I tossed him my keys. "Take her for a drive. Clear your head." He hesitated, stammering about professionalism, but I waved him off. "Trust me, you could use the escape more than I could." Without waiting for his reply, I stepped into the house. Inside, I expected to find Brad lounging in his usual spot in the living room. Instead, he stood behind the couch, pale and worn down. And sitting where Brad normally would have been, was my father. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He was wearing sweatpants. My father. The man who swore he'd die before anyone saw him in anything less than a full suit. Even stranger, a glass of red wine rested easily in his hand, filled nearly to the brim. A bottle stood open beside him. In my entire life, I had never seen my father drink wine. Brad's tired eyes found mine, and he gave me a weak smile. Hey, I replied cautiously. My father didn't move, didn't even acknowledge me, his gaze fixed on the unlit fireplace. Brad shook his head, signaling me silently, then gestured for me to follow him outside. On the terrace, the night air was brisk. My mother stood waiting, draped in a silk robe, a wine glass in hand. That sight didn't surprise me. My mother without wine would have been more shocking. She turned to face us. "You made it." I frowned. Did I ever really have a choice? Her sharp gaze silenced me, and for once, I didn't push further. "I don't even know what I was expecting," she admitted quietly, sipping her drink. Brad's voice came soft, weary. "When you told us you dropped the case against Vatic, that didn't make sense. We're trying to understand. We're on your side, Mum, but nothing is adding up." Her eyes dropped, and for the first time in years, I saw something I never expected to see in her, tears threatening to fall. Christian's POV. Brad and I sat down on the terrace chairs, while our mother remained standing near the balcony rail. A cold breeze swept across the panels, making her tighten the silk robe around her shoulders. I didn't understand why we were outside, or why our father wasn't with us. Brad fidgeted, pulling a small metal box from his pocket. He flipped it open and drew out a short cigarette. For a moment, our mother looked as if she wanted to scold him, but her lips pressed shut. This wasn't the time. Not when our father was inside, wearing sweatpants and drinking wine like a stranger in his own skin. We had far bigger matters at hand. The home Vatic and I grew up in was far from comforting, my mother began quietly. "I've told you both small pieces of it, but never the full truth. Partly to spare you, and partly to spare myself. They are memories I never wanted to relive." Her wine glass was nearly empty. With our father being violent, the one who protected me most was Vatic. He found odd jobs to keep us fed. He gave up his own schooling so I could stay in mine. Most of all, he took the brunt of our father's anger. Some nights, we wouldn't see our father for weeks. Those were the nights we prayed he wouldn't return at all. I listened, struggling to imagine what she had endured. The idea of wishing a parent would simply disappear, it was something I could barely wrap my head around. I grew an attachment to Vadik, she admitted, her voice trembling. At the time I thought it was love. But it wasn't. It was dependence, survival. He was the reason I had a roof over my head and food in my stomach. When someone shields you from pain, even in a broken way, it's hard not to confuse that with something else. Her eyes glistened, though she fought back the tears. Brad lit the cigarette, the flick of his lighter cutting through the silence. For a moment, the only sounds were his inhale and the soft clink of our mother's glass as she finished the last sip of wine. "What Vadik told you was true," she whispered. "There is more to our story than I've admitted. He twisted what I needed most, safety, shelter, into something else entirely. In his mind, he called it love. And perhaps in my confusion, I let myself believe it too. But it wasn't love. It was control." I glanced through the glass doors, where our father still sat staring blankly at the unlit fireplace. Did he already know all of this? Or was he hearing it for the first time tonight, just as we were? "I don't believe monsters are born monsters," she continued. "They're often shaped by cruelty, by circumstances. Vadik suffered terribly at the hands of our father. He even created a small hiding space in the wall behind my bed to protect me. Many nights, I would sit inside, listening as he took the blows meant for me. But even with all his apologies since then, the feelings he still clings to, they are one-sided. And unwanted." Another chill ran through me as the night air deepened. When I found out I was expecting Brad, I was terrified. Vadik, however, was overjoyed. He spoke often about wanting to be a better father than the one we had. By then, I knew what was happening to me wasn't right. I knew I had to leave. I told you before that I left, but I never said how. The truth is, I ran. I wish I'd severed ties completely back then. But guilt kept me bound. She drew a shaky breath, her voice quiet but steady. The money I gave Vadik over the years wasn't about the company. He didn't care about that. It was guilt for leaving him behind with our father. He was resourceful, yes, but still haunted. I thought by sending money, I was making up for abandoning him. When I told him I'd lost the baby after leaving, it was to protect Brad. But when our files were hacked, Vadik discovered the truth. Now, there's very little I can do to protect either of you from him." Her voice broke on the last words, sounding fragile, defeated in a way I had never heard before. Brad and I exchanged a look, both of us at a loss. The background checks I'd requested before Hawaii had shown her continued contact with Vadik, which we hadn't understood. It had contradicted her earlier stories. But I understood. She hadn't lied out of malice. She had lied out of guilt, fear, and survival. And it had cost her more than any of us realized. Christian's POV. My mother lifted her glass again, only to realize it was empty. For a moment, I thought she might excuse herself to refill it, but instead she set it down on the table near us and leaned against the banister, her back turned. "I kept all of this from you because I thought I was done with that life, or maybe that's just what I told myself," she said softly. Shame played a large part. Embarrassment too. "Look at you two," I raised strong men. "I couldn't bear to show you my weakness, my broken pieces." When the light caught her face, I saw silent tears glistening on her cheeks. She hadn't sniffled or made a sound, just cried with the same elegance she carried in everything else. "The one thing I don't regret, the one thing I will never regret, is you, Bradford." Her voice cracked as she looked at my brother. "I know I wasn't the best mother. I failed you in ways I can never fully mend, and for that, I am so sorry, my child." Her accent thickened as she slipped into Russian, and for a moment, her words carried more weight than ever. "I was so young, barely an adult when I had you. I missed holding you, nurturing you, the earliest years when you were left in that orphanage. I thought about how it hurt me, but I never stopped to consider how it must have hurt you. You carry the best parts of me, the kindness, the generosity, the empathy. Qualities I lost somewhere along the way. I used to tell myself I wasn't cold, just adjusted to the world. But seeing you both here, facing the fallout of my mistakes, makes me realize that isn't true." She dabbed at her tears with the sleeve of her robe, but more kept falling. Brad moved first. He finished his cigarette, snuffing it out on the edge of the table. Then he stood, pushing his chair back with a scrape against the floorboards. For a moment, I didn't know what he was going to do. But when he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around our mother, I let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You handled this in the messiest way possible," Brad said quietly, as she allowed his tall frame to fold around her. The hug startled me. It might have been one of the first times I had ever seen our mother let herself be held. "But you're still my mother," Brad continued. "You came back for me all those years ago. You didn't have to, but you did." My chest ached at his words, my own eyes beginning to sting. There's no handbook for parenting, and there certainly isn't one for raising your nephew as your son. That broke her. Her arms finally came around Brad, clinging to him as more tears fell. Moonlight caught the dark stains on her silk sleeves. "All I ever wanted was unconditional love," Brad whispered, his voice steady though his eyes shimmered. "I think that's all any child wants. Your love came with conditions, but it was the only way you knew how. I've learned something these past few months. Nothing you've done can't be mended. It just takes work. And if there's one thing you've never lacked, it's determination." Our mother shook into his chest, her composure finally breaking. Brad's hold only tightened, though he kept himself steady for her sake. Eventually, he pulled back just enough to look at her. "The one thing I want to know," he said, his tone lighter now, "is why Dad is sitting inside in sweatpants, drinking wine." Mother let out a faint laugh through her tears, brushing at the damp stains on Brad's sweater, though he gently pushed her hands away. "Don't worry about it," he murmured. She kissed his forehead and whispered something I couldn't catch. "I was wondering the same thing," I added. "Did he find out about your past tonight?" She shook her head. "No. Your father has dug himself into an entirely different hole, and this time, all on his own." The weight in her voice dropped into my stomach. "What do you mean?" Brad asked. Mother instinctively reached for her glass, only to remember it was empty. With a sigh, she turned back to us. "Do you both remember Yaakov?" Brad and I furrowed our brows immediately. "Dad's military friend?" Brad asked quicker than I could. "Yes," Mother nodded. "He was one of your father's closest companions during his time overseas. Later, he also became one of your father's earliest partners in his research work. It appears he'll be visiting in the coming days." Brad and I exchanged a look. "Isn't that good?" Brad asked cautiously. Mother shook her head again, her eyes heavy. "It would have been, if your father hadn't drunkenly promised Christian's hand in marriage." Christian's POV. I was the first to make a sound, an incredulous, dry laugh. You must be joking, right?" I asked our mother. "Father would never agree to something like that." Brad cut me off. "Not sober, though. But Dad drunk? That's a whole different story." He sank back into a terrace chair, clearly preparing for a long discussion. And he wasn't wrong. It took nearly an entire bar to get our father drunk, but when he reached that point, anything was possible. We'd only seen it a handful of times. He always claimed he'd left that part of his life behind. I couldn't help but wonder now, when exactly had he made this promise? "But even so," Brad continued, "it's not like he actually has to uphold it, right? I'm more confused about why he'd feel comfortable making such a promise in the first place," I muttered. "Drunk or not?" Mother interjected before either of us could continue. "In your father's defense, until recently we assumed you might end up alone, Christian. You've moved through women at lightning speed, professionally and personally. We thought maybe arranging someone for you was best." I opened my mouth to argue, but Brad beat me to it. "Pretty sure most of those women were introduced by you, Mother," he said sharply. "That's not really the best point to make right now." The flick of his lighter drew our eyes, his second cigarette of the evening, which summed up the mood perfectly. Mother sighed. "Why don't we speak with your father? He can explain this better than I can." She glanced at her empty glass. Clearly, she needed a refill. I needed to get out of the cold. Brad waved us on. "You go ahead. I'll join you in a bit." I led Mother back inside. Slav was still in the living room, wine glass in hand, one leg crossed neatly over the other. He looked almost dazed. "Dad?" I said, nodding his way as I sat down across from him. He gave me the smallest nod in return, his gaze locked on the unlit fireplace. "Mother told us you made a promise to Yaakov. Dad, are you even listening?" I pressed, my voice sharper than intended. Finally, his eyes tore away from the fireplace and landed on me. Cold, unreadable. For the first time in my life, I saw him expressionless. "I'm listening," he said quietly. Something in his defeated tone made me soften. "What happened?" There was a long, waited pause before he whispered, "I was taken advantage of, my sweet boy." He let his head fall back into the couch dramatically. "Taken advantage of?" I echoed. "My Yaakov. If I had known he was serious. I thought he was just checking in, all that liquor." His words were fragmented, disjointed. From the sound of it, he had seen Yaakov recently. That realization sent a ripple of concern through me. If father barely remembered, what exactly had he agreed to? "Did Yaakov call?" I asked, but mother shook her head. "Oh no, Christian. Yaakov came here." My eyes widened. "He's here? In the States?" "Yes. He arrived 2 days ago." Your father didn't even recall what he had agreed to until Yaakov produced the documents. Brad walked back in just as the word documents left her mouth. He closed the doors behind him, shutting out the cold draft. "Documents?" Brad and I asked in unison. Mother's voice was steady. "Your father signed a contract." "What?" Brad demanded, storming forward. His expression hardened, the lawyer in him now fully awake. "You what? What contract?" Father's flash of irritation showed he didn't appreciate Brad's tone, but he didn't protest. Instead, he sighed. "It was years ago. I thought it was harmless. If neither you nor Yaakov's daughter were married by a certain time, we thought we could arrange something." Brad's face tightened. "When exactly did you sign this?" Father waved vaguely. "Yaakov suggested it a few years ago. Back then you were seeing, what was her name? Brittany? Brandy? Bridge," I corrected. Father frowned. "What kind of name is that?" "It's Bridget," Brad clarified with a sigh. "Christian just called her Bridge." Father grumbled, then shook his head. "Not the point. I thought you were serious about her. Never in a million years did I expect you to be gay." I offered. "Fall for your assistant?" he finished flatly. I couldn't help a small chuckle. For all the chaos, my parents had never once questioned Alex and me. Their blunt acceptance always surprised me, and I was grateful for it. "That wasn't exactly planned," I admitted. In my defense, Alex did win me over. I was taken advantage of too. I mimicked father's dramatic pose, leaning back in the chair. He shot me a glare. Mother cut in gently. "Your father just wanted you to find happiness. And it seems you finally have." Her words made me smile, but it didn't erase the weight of what I'd just learned. "Unfortunately, father has promised my hand to someone else," I muttered. The room fell into tense silence as father poured himself another glass of wine, filling it to the brim. It was Brad who finally broke the quiet. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling smoke. "Well," he said, "there is one very simple loophole to all of this." "And what's that?" I asked. "You could just marry Alex." He shrugged. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.